Tonight, we're pleased to have Derek Antonelli. He's a well-known botanist from North Idaho. He's the perennial, would you call yourself the perennial president of Calypso?
I just say president for
Of Calypso Chai. And he's also the lead for the North Idaho Rare Plant Working Group, which he does an excellent job of. So I don't know any personal things about you, so I guess that'll have to be. You live in Rathdrum. Do you live in Rathdrum?
I live in Rathdrum. Yeah, also with the Idaho Master Naturalist.
Oh, okay.
Work I put in here, also log against that. I've got 5,000 hours of the last 8 years.
Wow. And this is all volunteer, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's all volunteers.
So we're pleased to have him here with us tonight to talk about wetlands, North Idaho wetland plants. Thank you.
Hope I can get all this to work. So I like to kind of break up wetland plants into like 4 different categories tonight. I'm going to be talking about submergent plants. These are the ones that grow under the water, under the surface of the water. And then there's the floating plants that grow float right on the surface of the water. And then the emergent plants grow up out of the water. And finally, we'll look at some of the riparian plants, mostly the shrubs. And for each of those, we'll be looking at some of the adaptations for those. And then we'll look at some examples. So there's literally thousands and thousands of these plants. So we'll only probably go through about 20 or something like that. So submergent plants. These are again plants that have their stems and leaves are primarily under the water. They usually put their flowers above the water. They need to do that so they can exchange pollen, those sorts of things. So their flowers will be supported on a stem that sticks up out of the water. They may or may not be attached to the bottom. They may just be drifting around. And they can grow either near the shore or out many feet in depth. So those are submergent plants. And of course, the plants, they don't know about these categories, so sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 of the categories. So one of the adaptations is they usually have reduced or no roots. The roots, well, since their leaves and stems are right in direct contact with the water, they can absorb all the nutrients they need through the stems and through the roots. So they don't have root hairs usually. The roots are primarily used for anchoring the plant down if it comes into contact with the water or the substrate. And this is a nice little a buttercup. That's an aquatic plant. The other thing, another adaptation for submergent plants is they have highly divided leaves. So you can see how divided these leaves are. And that's because they've got gives them greater surface area for photosynthesis and for absorbing the nutrients and things they need out of the water. It also offers less resistance if they're in moving water. So interesting thing is when these plants put shoots up above the water line, they turn into more normal leaves. So this is from the same plant. So and you can actually see them. You can actually see the ones under the water are like this, and the ones sitting right up on the top with the flower coming out are like that. So.
What is that?
This is a water crow's foot, which is a little ranunculus, a little buttercup. So, and you see it quite a lot. You'll see these flowers out on the tops of the sticking up out of the water, and you suspect you're probably looking at that. And they're tiny. They're maybe a ½ inch, maybe a little bit bigger than that across. So. Another adaptation is the fact that they depend on buoyancy for their support. So if you pick them up out of the water, they just go limp. They have, also they have a reduced epidermis. So if, you're collecting plants, you know, you think these would be the hard ones to dry out, but these are the easiest ones to dry out. You put them in the press, as soon as the water's damped off, they basically dry right out. Now, if you get something like a stone crop, a sedum, you know, you put them in your press and you'll have to work on them for 2 months to get them dried out, so. They dry out really easy. That's because they don't have the waxes and things to hold the water in them. They just, it just evaporates right out of them immediately. Another one of the adaptations, of course, they need to put their flowers up above the water's surface so they can exchange pollen. Get the flowers pollinated. There are a few that have their flowers underneath the water surface. I don't know how they manage that. So, and so you've got a pondweed over there. You can see you'll see those stick out of the water sometimes. Or in this case, this is a bladder pod. Very pretty flower. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I'll be talking about that a little bit more later when I show you some of the examples. So this is that water crow's foot, Ranunculus aquatilis. I think there's a couple other species in there that are very similar in that ranunculus group as well. But you can see it's got a little tiny white flower that just sticks up right about an inch out of the water, above the water surface. You can look down and see all those finely divided leaves, or sometimes you'll see these leaves sitting up above the water. Maybe you probably heard of milfoil. This is supposedly the native, but I'm not sure they know the difference between which ones are native and which ones aren't. So I think there's a lot of hybridization going on. So mostly when the state, I guess it's state lands. Anyway, somebody from the state comes through and sprays. They spray for all this stuff. But yeah, it kind of does the same thing, clogs up all the waterways. Coon's tail, you might see this. I've never seen this in flower. I don't know what its flower look like. I know they probably have one. But they've got little rough notches along there. You might feel those if you pick up the leaf or pick up the plant out of the water. Elodea, we actually have a couple different Elodeas around here. I guess you call it waterweed. I have problems with all the common names because they're either waterweed or water this and water that. And, they just kind of all blur together. But the Elodea is what I've been calling this forever since I was in high school, which was a couple of years ago. And with the two we have, this is the Canadensis, the Canadian waterweed, and then the other one has a little narrower leaf, more pointed, and that's the Nuttall's waterweed. This is a plant that's on the Idaho noxious weed list. So this is another one of the Potamoketans. We saw. Well, we have a few more coming up, but you can see this one's got the really curly leaf margins. So that's how you know when you're looking at the curly pondweed, and it's one of the Idaho noxious weeds. I see it a lot more when I'm in, say, along the Snake River down in South Idaho. You see a lot of it in there, but you see it in local waters as well. And these are different types of pondweeds. This one's called large leaf or amplifolius. You can see down under the water, they've got great big, their leaves are about like that. So you're out there water skiing. I remember being out there water skiing and seeing this stuff growing up underneath the water, and eventually they come up and hit the surface, and you see how these actually float on the surface. The leaves, they don't stick up out of the water. They float on the surface. You see how they change form when they hit the water and hit the surface. So, and most of the pondweeds have a fruiting body that's very similar to this. And anybody has questions as we go along, please jump right in and let me know, so. This is a really interesting one. This is the common bladderwort. It has these little pods on there. And this is actually an insectivorous plant or a meat-eating one. They get a little crustaceans. I don't know if you ever heard of Daphnia and those sorts of things. So those types of crustaceans, they somehow get into those pods and then they get digested. So that's one of several types of carnivorous plants that we have. You know, you've got the sundews. In Idaho, you've got these, and seems like there's another one or two. But it has a very pretty flower when it's sticking up out of the water. So. And again, very, very divided leaves. So. Okay, any questions then on the submergent ones? We're gonna start looking at the floating plants. So these, the leaves are floating on the top of the water. They can be free floating, or they are able to drift around, or they can be attached to the bottom, and then grow from the bottom up to the surface, and then their leaves will float on the surface, like a lily pad and such stuff. Here, the chlorophyll is concentrated in that top layer of the leaf that's floating on the surface. Because that, of course, is where all the light is. All the stomas are those breathing pores. Those are limited to the upper surface of the leaf. And that's really the only opportunity that the plant has for exchanging gases at the surface. So.
What does it do until it gets up to the top?
I think it holds its breath. I don't know. So. It must be absorbing whatever gases it needs from the other. I think it usually has a lot of energy stored, so it's not like it has to do photosynthesis. One of the reasons it has to hit that surface. But the upper surface of these floating plants is often covered with a waxy coating. You can see how this water is just kind of beating up on that on the pond lily here. And that does two things. It repels the water, so it helps the leaf float. So the water won't stick, so it just keeps getting pushed up. And then it also allows the dirt that collects on it to get washed off as well. So when the water beads up and runs off. This is an interesting one. Water shield. I've seen it grow over the whole surface of ponds, and so you see it. It's about the size of a silver dollar or something, and it'll just cover the whole thing. And of course, turtles be sticking their heads up in between the leaves and such. But if you ever reach down and try to pick a leaf so you can put it in your collection or whatever, you can't do it. You reach down there and you grab it, and it just slides right up. You try to get it. You can see all this slime it's got on the stem, so it keeps you from being able to grab a hold of it. And then it'll put out this flower when it's time to flower. You'll see those picking up. You can see one here getting ready to bloom.
How big is that leaf?
The leaf, silver dollar size, maybe just slightly bigger than that. And these leaves can get pretty. This is American water lily, so it'll have a medium size leaf. Very, very pretty flower, the white flower. And then you have the yellow water lily with the bright yellow flowers, and those can be very big. Although the ones I have back here, maybe this size, but those. They'll get to be 1.5 foot across or something sometimes. And one of the other interesting things is you see once in a while is you see here's an underwater stem that's somehow gotten dislodged off the bottom, floated up to the surface. It's like a palm tree down there. They're about this big around, 6 inches across sometimes. Great big heavy things, and that's what puts out all so the new fronds from the next year come off the tips of that. So. Then you have little tiny ones. I don't know if you've seen duckweed before, but little bitty things. And duckweed or lemna minor, it has a single. It'll have a single root hanging down underneath. That's how you can tell it from the next one. I think we're going to look at. So it's pretty small. The next one, so this is duckweed, and the next one's duck meat. Oh, good. I got the order right. This is a little bit bigger, maybe twice the size of a thing, but it's got this red dot that you see. And then if you look at the bottom, you know, turn it over and look at it. Of course, it's kind of reddish on the bottom, but it'll have many roots. So that's why it's called polyrhiza. So many roots.
Like wires.
Yeah, so there are really a lot of them there. So you'll find both of those, say, growing in the cattails. You know, you walking in between the cattails, you'll see them down underneath there. You'll see lots of the same places. So if you're ever out, you see like a 4-leaf clover floating on the surface. That's actually a spore producing plant related to the ferns. Yeah, again, this is one of those that really doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to what category it's supposed to be in. So when it's growing out in deep water, it'll be sending up, and its leaves will be floating on the surface. When the lake dries out, and it's a big mud flat, it'll grow more like this, more like look like a clover there. It'll have, and this is where the spores are produced. These bodies down right at the ground level. And this is a different pondweed. Remember we saw several before. This one here has more floating leaves again, so it's hard to tell. Some of them stand up out of the water, some of them are submergent, and some are floating leaves. Again, the same type of fruiting structure. And you can see, I think these are the duck meat instead of the duckweed, because you see the little dots in there. And that's it for the floating plants. Anybody have questions on those? Okay, next we'll be looking at the emergent plants. These are the herbaceous plants that are rooted at the bottom, but their stems and leaves grow up out of the water, so they extend out of the water, therefore they're emerging from the water. They generally don't grow in water much deeper than 4 or 5 feet, because of course you got to reach to the surface. But you'll find like cattails grown in water this deep. You're hoping it doesn't flow in your your boots while you're out there walking through. And emergent plants are what dominate the marshes that you'll see.
If they get separated, if the root gets separated from the soil below, and they start floating, do they still survive?
It probably depends a little on both the plant and whether they're able to get reconnected somehow. Again, they may drift up on the shore. Lots of times you'll see these things like on a lake shore. You'll see stuff that's been somehow pulled loose, you know, and then they'll drift to shore, and they might reroot there. And they can survive quite a while just drifting around, I think, as well. So. But some of them, you'll see a lot of them are all decomposing too, so it goes both ways. Adaptations for emergent plants is they have to have fairly firm or stiff stems that allow them to stand up above the water surface. They have to have elongated stems, so if they're in deep water, that they can reach up above the surface, and that ensures that at least some portion of the plant is able to photosynthesize. Another adaptation is they have specialized tissues that allow them to bring air and oxygen and carbon dioxide back and forth down their stems through the water. And I don't know if you've ever cut into a cattail or we used to call them tulies. Cut into those, they'll have these really porous things, and that's called that's a special stem, special tissue called arenchyma. Allows air to back and forth through the plants. So, speaking of tulies, here it is. If you can tell the hard stem from the soft stem bulrush, you're doing better than me. It has something to do with the colors of the stripe on the little scales that are on in these clusters or something. So sometimes you can tell a little bit by the color, or the hard stem is usually a little grayer and the other one's redder, or the other way around, I forget. But it's not too easy to tell them apart. You can see these grow in areas where the water level fluctuates quite a bit, so you can see how much lighter it is up to about there. So water level was there, and then it's dropped as the season goes on. Cattails are another good example of this. They have a lot of the same things. The primary cattail we have around here is the broadleaf cattail, but there is a narrowleaf cattail that I've seen up at the Canadian border, just inside of Idaho. Uh-huh.
How is the cattail? I think it's all over the northern hemisphere.
There are a number of different species. I'm not sure if there are some that cover the entire range, or if it's just overlapping coverages by a number of different species. So.
I've always been curious, though, given its widespread distribution and it's often found in very isolated places, how does it not have speciated? Do the taxonomists not have just looked at it over?
Well, that could be. It could be. Next time you look at the book, there'll be 15 more of them in there. So you gotta watch what you wish for there. So.
I'm not just wishing for it. I'm just curious as to how it is so stable.
Well, again, there are several species. I think they hybridized when I was up there at Boundary Creek Wildlife Management Area, which is that far from Canada. They're both growing there, and there's some that you can't tell which one they really are. So I think they're hybridizing in those areas. And I don't know if you ever seen the seeds on these things when they come off, and off they go. So they spread their seeds pretty far, probably pretty far and wide. So
As kids, we used to have cattail wars.
cattail wars, that's right. Get them spear. I mean, good spear, like good clubs too, don't they? This is another woolgrass. Might see it around. In the spring, it starts to go to flower, and then as it goes on, eventually each of these spikelets here become very woolly and putting out the seeds have very long hairs, and so it gives a really cottony look. So that gives it the name of the woolgrass. It was at one time thought to be a rare plant in North Idaho, but I think they just decided that there's a lot more of it than what they originally thought. So you see it quite a bit. I don't know if you've seen it or you see it around here or not. I've seen it along the Coeur d'Alene River, along the Ponderay River. So. Another closely related is the panicle bulrush. So a little different appearance, and the leaves there's differences in the leaves as well, but they grow in a lot of the similar environments. So usually water that's maybe 6 inches deep, and it might just be temporary. So. This is my favorite sedge, so I included this one. I think I've got a sample of it back there. It's got these really big heads, so You can see them back there. They're, I don't know. A few inches along there, and they got very long, what are those things called? What are those called? I can't think of. I remember everything, I just can't recall anything. So, anyway, oh, bracts, floral bracts, the lowest one, very long in this particular one, so. Not she said, I think pretty good. And if you open up these, perennial, you'll find, when it's mature, you'll find a very hard seed in there with a very hard style. Usually styles are, real soft and fallen off a long time ago, but these are really, really hard and stiff, so. That's, one of the things that you can tell you're looking at, there's a whole group of sedges that have that, but, it's a very pronounced. Another one, this is the all fruited sedge. Carrot stipata. Another pretty interesting one. I like this one as well. And then this is one of those plants, again, doesn't know what it really is. You can see how because it can float on the surface, or it can stick up above the surface, or you can even find it growing under the water as a submerged. So that's a water smartweed. There's several of those, several in that category that are around in North Idaho. This is, I believe, a really important native food is the arrowhead or the duck potato or the wapato. There's actually a couple different species. I don't think it really matters which one you're looking at, but you see why it's called arrowhead is you have the arrowhead shaped leaf. Really pretty flowers sticking up. See what it looks like up close. So, and then the tubers that grow down underneath provide a good food source. Closely related plant is the water plantain. You can see how similar the flowers are, but they don't have the triangular, the arrow-shaped heads. So. And again, you can see how it grows in that maybe 6 inches of water. Questions on those?
Yeah, the duck potato, is that the same species as the Orleans purpose? The water potatoes?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think those, well, there's at least 2 different species that are in the area. And I don't think it matters which one you're digging up. I think you get a very similar product either way. So next we'll look at riparian plants. These are ones that Judy wanted to get a good look at, so I added these to it. So mostly just talking about shrubs, all of the types of, so riparian plants are plants that grow along creeks and rivers. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. Back to the first. What is wild rice?
Wild rice is a type of grass.
Okay.
That grows up out of the water, so it's an emergent. It is not native to North Idaho, but it is grown in North Idaho, and it is established in a number of areas. I think it's Rose Lake. It might be Killarney Lake. Right in that area. There's some I've seen it here and there, other places, but it's got good populations there at I think Killarney Lake. Enough so when you're running through the marsh out there with a airboat, you just get nailed with those little hard rices getting jabbed into your chest. So, at least that's what I've heard. I've never actually experienced that. So yeah, these are plants that grow along rivers and streams and other bodies of water. Basically, they're in a transition between aquatic and terrestrial habitats, usually subject to periodic flooding. So that's the way they've evolved. Sometimes when you put in a dam, it just kind of reverses the flooding cycle. So instead of flooding in the spring and draining off, the pond fills, the lake fills up in the summer and just stays here all summer. So all of those plants that that we've been talking about all drowned out. There's not enough. There's not enough exposure, so they're drowned. So that's one of the big problems that the dams have is, you maybe lose, I think they lost 28,000 acres when they put in Albany Falls Dam on Ponderay Lake and Ponderay Rivers. But so these are a lot of them have the same adaptations as emergent plants. And there are numerous species of shrubs and trees that occupy this habitat. Some of the adaptations they have is, of course, since it gets they're adapted to periodic flooding. They have a tolerance of flooding. They have flexible stems, so when the rivers come up and they're just really flowing, they just bend out of the way and just survive the flood through being able to bend out of the way. They also have long stems that'll keep part of the plant up out of the water during the floods. They also have a tolerance for frequent flooding. They can easily sprout with new stems. And they have a number of different reproductive strategies. They've got buoyant seeds, and seeds will float. So when the seeds fall off, they'll float down the river and wash up on the banks in a number of different places. Cottonwoods are really good for that. And that's one of the problems with the cottonwoods are having now is they're not getting reestablished with new trees, is because you don't have as much seasonal flooding as you did once the dams went in. So, and also they're able to have vegetative propagation. A lot of beaver debris, you ever seen beavers are always cutting the stuff down? Well, they always leave little bits and pieces, and those float down and land on the shoreline and then go ahead and sprout right there. So, hi Liz. So, speaking of the beavers, got this clip off. It was actually a movie. You can see he just trotted right across the road with dragging the three branches there. So that's one of the adaptations that these types of things have, is they can grow back after they get trimmed off. They can when they get put in let's say a beaver dam, they'll go ahead and sprout and get established that way. And that's the functionality that I've got to talk about, and I'll just go through a few of the examples. Beb willow is I'd say a medium-sized willow tree. It's got a fairly light undersurface, fairly well, but then green on the top. It's got a pretty distinctive shape in terms of some of the willows, so you basically can tell it from those, and just the fact that this is one of the more common ones.
It's a beard.
I think that varies as how young or old the leaf is. So I think they maybe start off hairy and then lose those hairs after a period. Mackenzie's willows, this is one of my favorite ones. Usually they have really pretty red tips on their stems. And it's a pretty sizable tree for a willow. And the other thing it has, and not consistently, but it'll have these great big what's that? Stipules. Yes, I knew that. See, that's one of those things I can remember but can't recall. So.
Do they, not all of them have that?
They're very prominent in this. I don't know if I think they don't all have that. This one has very prominent ones. Not necessarily every, you can see it's not every place. You got like three or four different kinds of these narrow leaf willows. Sinix exua is one of the names of one of them, but there's like 2 or 3 or 4 species, depending on whose reference you want to look at in the local area. There's a sandbar willow and the coyote willow and narrow leaf willow, so. But it has narrow leaves, very, a lot of canes coming out of that. They spread really fast, makes them good for establishing, water breaks and stuff, so you put those out there and they'll spread really fast and you'll be able to secure your banks and such fairly quickly. And this is just another example. This is the dusky willow. Same. It's one of those 3 or 4 that I was talking about, another narrow leaf. But you see how this one has teeth on the leaves and some of the other ones didn't, so. Yeah, you gotta get it. Yeah, you really, if you want to figure out which one you're looking at, you have to get out the book and.
They call it black seeds or something.
I don't know.
Oh.
I just write this stuff down and go on. Drum and willow, is pretty common one you'll see. It has collagen, really woolly hairs on the underside of the leaf. Also, if you can notice right here, the underside of the leaf is just curled under. So.
Is that, does that grow in some fairly dry sites?
Mostly I've seen it in pretty stream banks and things like that, so I haven't seen that. There is the one that grows upland situation, that's the Schooler's willow. And that's, I think, the only upland willow that we have is the Schooler's. Red Oz or dogwood, this one also, like willow, if you were to cut a stem, you can put it in and it'll root. Doesn't do quite as well as willows do it, but does it pretty well. You can see you've got a pretty distinctive venation on the leaves. Now this one, this is a dogwood that doesn't have those big floral bracts like you see in a flowering dogwood, but it's related to dogwoods as well. So it just has those flowers that are in the center of those other bracts. You can see where it gets its name as red osier. You can see there in that fence row how red those stems are, and they develop that redness when it gets a lot of sun. So, or maybe if you find it back in the woods or something, it'll be a lot greener back in the shade. The berries it gets. What do we got? Alders. I would have called this either the thin leaf alder or the gray alder, but somebody else calls it the mountain alder. Allis incana tenuiflora is the thin leaf, which is the variety that we have throughout our area. And it grows in a lot of the riparian situations. So
Why would you call it thin?
the book I was started with, that's what it was called, so. Yeah, everybody has a different name for them, so. Yeah, and you can tell alders, they've got these little, catkins, kind of woody, look like a little pine cone, so. So when you see that, you know you're looking at an alder, but you won't know which of the alders you're looking at necessarily. And, they've got the pollen catkins as well. These grow really well in restoration types of projects. You go and you put some of these in, and in 10 years it'll be up to the ceiling here. So, and you know, it'll be to where you can't. You've got to get down on your hands and knees to crawl through a patch of them. So if that's what you're looking for, this is the species, these are the types of plants you want to plant for that, so. And they have another adaptation, and I think Kai's familiar with, is that they particularly alders have the ability to fix nitrogen. So, and it's an adaptation probably to the type of environment it grows in that's very very hydrant, so stays wet all the time, therefore probably loses the nitrogen, so. What do we got? Black cottonwood, huge, they can be huge trees. Again, they're not being replaced, as fast as we're losing them. So, you can see why it's called cottonwood, is because every spring it puts out little seeds, and every seed has these big long hairs, and they blow all over everywhere. Big piles of seed, and hairs everywhere. And then these things are kind of interesting too, because they'll fall off the tree, and you walk around and your shoes will just turn bright red sticky. But you can see, we go ahead and, when you have a flood, they'll go ahead and reseed themselves. Because the seeds will get washed in and deposited in the road. There, so. That's what I got. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Is it the same as yellow willow? And it's not native, right?
Is that the one you see in the big along the creeks? You see it? Yeah, I think that's, I'm not sure what that is. It might be Salix alba. Which is probably,
Is it native or not native?
I think it's not native, but I don't know for sure.
I think that's correct.
I think it's not native.
People call it the golden rose.
There are all kinds of names, so.
Maybe they call it the foolish willow and it's not native.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before, because I look at it, I said, oh, that's probably a Salix alba, which is I don't know if that's I forget what I call it, what the common name I use.
So a lot of times you see roots out in ponds,
Uh-huh.
eating things that are growing from the bottom, but do you know what they're specialized?
The stuff that's grown in there on the bottom. I've wanted to get in and do a survey at a site once, and I come here and here's this moose standing there. So, okay, I'll go do something else. Come back the next day and the moose is stuck in that same spot. Yeah, head going in, coming out, going in, coming out. 3 days in a row, that moose was there. So finally it was gone, and I was able to get back and do my surveys. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for your attention and your questions. And
Got, things to look at back there.
yes, I brought in some specimens out of my collection, and please take a look at those. And yeah.
Well, we really appreciate it.